How do you define who's a Jew? It's so complicated today. Now, technically, halakhically, by conservative and Orthodox standards, if you're born to a Jewish mother, really no matter what you do the rest of your life, you're Jewish. Now, if you're an apostate and you leave the religion, you may be denied certain communal norms, and the Supreme Court of Israel has ruled to this monk who showed up, who was born Jewish, that he's not a Jew. Still, we have a belief, once a Jew, always a Jew. Although I would say a Jew for Jesus is not Jewish, but in some sense, they were born Jewish. But what do you do with, like, Representative Giffords, who tragically was shot in Arizona? Her father's Jewish, her mother wasn't. She claimed her Jewishness. There's Misha Berach prayers, healing prayers being said for all over the world. But in a conservative or Orthodox synagogue, she couldn't have an aliyah of the Torah. So obviously the definition of who's Jewish is fluid. And there was a wonderful article in Forward by Rabbi Susan Fendrick talking about this issue. Even the State of Israel recognizes there's nuances. For example, when I convert somebody, they're converted by conservative rabbis. They're recognized worldwide except for the Orthodox, although a few Orthodox rabbis quietly will accept it. But the majority won't. In the State of Israel, Rabbanut won't accept it for the purposes of Jewish status. However, we've had people graduate our program who've made Aliyah, because even Israel recognizes that there's different kinds of Jewishness. There's the Jewishness for the Orthodox, ultra-Orthodox rabbis, and then there's Jewish peoplehood. In fact, in an emergency situation like getting the Jews out of the Soviet Union, a big chunk of the people who went to Israel were not Jewish by any stretch of the imagination. Let's say you have a Jewish guy with a non-Jewish wife, and they have children, so children wouldn't be halakhically Jewish. And then her parents, they all come, and that's why there's so many more churches in Israel now, and stores selling ham and restaurants, because all these people who are not Jewish, but they're part of the Jewish people in some sense. In fact, when you ask the question, how many Jews there are in America, and the answer may be, let's say, 6 million, but if you ask the question, how many people live in homes where there are Jews, the answer is 9 or 10 million. There's all these people that are sort of fellow travelers. In fact, in the Torah, there was a category called Ger Toshav, of people who lived among the Jewish people, and Ger Tzedek, who actually converted. And now to make things even more complicated, you have the Reform and Reconstructionist rabbis who accept the patrilineal definition, which means that either the mother or the father are Jewish. Then you can be Jewish if you're raised Jewishly. Now, the first 2,000 years in Jewish history in the Bible went by the father, and then the last 2,000 years it went by the mother. So this is a new idea that either parent can make one Jewish. Now, when somebody comes to me, as they have, who were born to a, let's say, adopted and never went to the mikvah, or they were born to a Jewish father and non-Jewish mother, and they never converted, and they lived their life, and they were bat mitzvahed and confirmed in a Reformed synagogue, I can't really say they're not Jewish. I mean, they're Jewish in many ways, but they may not be technically halakhically Jewish for the purposes of conservative Jewish law. But they're not. You can't just say you're not Jewish. Stop. So in the cases where, let's say, they want me to perform their wedding, then I you actually finish their Jewish status. It's like living in America all your life and not being a citizen. I mean, coming here when you're 1 day old and not being a citizen and finishing up your conversion, but you are American in many ways. So the definition of who's Jewish and what's Jewish is really very fluid, and it can't be just one simple statement. She says in the article, this drives demographers crazy, yes, but we have to be very nuanced in our ideas about who's a Jew and what's a Jew today, and we just are glad so many people want to live Jewish lives. It gets even more complicated when you've got full-blown Christians who are keeping kosher, studying Torah, putting mezuzahs on their door, buying taluses and shofarot. I even saw they can buy a Sefer Torah from Israel. It gets really complicated. So we want to move forward in Jewish history with the large definition of what's Jewish. And even though some people may not be able to have an aliyah in a conservative Orthodox synagogue, and we need to keep definitions, we also have to have an expansive view of people that want to participate in Jewish life and with whom we are trying to make God's kingdom on this earth. Shalom.